The abduction. This is not a journal entry. It is not something I am telling to remember the past. This is a warning. If you have any sense, learn a lesson from it. I don't know how I survived that incident. Maybe I was just lucky. Maybe I was smart. Maybe God wanted me to live. But what I experienced did not stay in a specific time frame. It spread throughout my life. It was etched into my brain more deeply than you can imagine. It was August 3 years ago. The weather was scorching. I had turned the fan towards myself and was watching TV, slumped on the sofa like melted cheese. I had just finished my first year of university and was in a good mood, growing my hair long and sporting a goatee. My plan for that summer was to spend my vacation in my hometown, but my roommate had convinced me to stay and work in the city where we were studying, as we were both in a tight financial situation. I had only known him for less than a year, but we had become like lifelong friends. We had shared a room in the state dorm, along with 2 other people, but we got along so well that we decided to move into an apartment. Everything started with that wrong decision. The man who seemed so good and honest in the state dorm turned out to be someone involved in far more sinister things, dealing with knowledge beyond my wildest dreams. The semester had ended a month ago, and since I didn't have any failed courses, I was relaxed. I told my family I had found a job and wouldn't be coming home that summer. We had been living together for a month, and for that entire month, I didn't encounter anything abnormal. We drank Reiki almost every night, talked about girls, and shared our troubles. But at the end of that month, I started to feel a weirdness. I realized my feelings weren't wrong one night when I got up to pee. We had drunk some beer before bed. I was feeling a bit buzzed, and I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, incredibly thirsty and with a full bladder. The toilet was at the end of the hallway. My friend's room was to the left of the toilet, and my room was at the other end of the hallway. Sleep-addled, I walked down the hallway toward the toilet. I noticed noises coming from the left and smoke coming from under my friend's door. I knocked, but there was no sound. I knocked louder, still no sound. I opened the door, and my friend was sleeping. I said, "Get up, man, what's going on?" He woke up and asked what was wrong. I said, "I should be asking you that. There was smoke coming from under your door." He said I must have been seeing things because I was still sleepy, so I didn't press the issue, but I was pretty freaked out. I peed and went back to bed. I woke up late the next morning because it was Sunday. I hadn't had any dreams that night. Atakan, I'm using a similar name for him, had woken up before me and had already made tea. I got some cheese out of the fridge. He brought the tea. I had only said good morning, and we hadn't talked until we sat down for breakfast. We sat down, and there was something about him. He kept giving me sideways glances, but they were full of hatred. I asked if he was okay. He just said, "I'm fine." I asked him what that was about last night, with the noises and the smoke. He said the computer was on, and it must have been from a movie. I was even more curious because his computer wasn't usually on at night. He slept in a completely dark room. I asked what he was going to do that day. He said he'd probably rest in his room. I said okay and went out with some friends. I got home around 11 p.m., and that's when the nightmare began. The moment I opened the door, I was shocked. All the lights in the rooms were off, and there were small candles burning in the hallway. I immediately turned on the light and went to his room. I knocked, and he opened the light first, then the door. I asked, "What's with the candles, man?" He said, "Oh, sorry, dude. The power went out, and I forgot to blow them out." My suspicions were already high, and I was even more scared. I didn't say anything and went to my room. I lit a cigarette and stared at the ceiling, wondering what was going on. I'm not usually easily scared, but seeing 3 candles burning in a dark house after all that happened truly freaks a person out. I started to think about quitting my job and going back home, or leaving this apartment when I got back, but I kept trying to convince myself it was all a coincidence. Anyway, that night, I fell asleep, staring at the ceiling. I woke up in the morning, but I felt a weight on me. I got up and looked out the window. The sky was reddish, but the sun was nowhere to be seen, just a suffocating redness. The streets were empty. I was about to lie down again, but when I turned around, I saw Atakan looking at me with his bright blue eyes, and his feet were facing the wrong way. I couldn't see his face, only that he was looking at me. I felt like I was about to faint, and then I woke up. I was drenched in sweat. I had never had such a nightmare in my life. It was 2:30 a.m., but I felt like I had been sleeping for years. It's so hard to describe the helplessness I felt then. I just sat on the bed and tried to comfort myself, telling myself that I had this nightmare because of all the stories I had heard, that it was my subconscious playing tricks on me. I always kept a jug of water in my room, but it was empty. I turned on the light and was about to go to the kitchen to get some, but after a nightmare like that, I was terrified of going to the kitchen. I took the jug and walked down the dark hallway. The light switch for the hallway was at the other end, so to get to the rest of the house from my room, I had to walk through that dark corridor first. I left my door open to provide some light and walked quickly towards the kitchen. I was finally in the kitchen. I turned on the faucet and was filling the jug, cursing the faucet for running so slowly. The jug filled up. I turned off the faucet, and when I turned around, I saw Atakan. The jug fell to the floor. My face turned ashen. He said, "What's wrong, brother?" "Sorry if I scared you." I said, "It's nothing, man. But why did you come in silently in the middle of the night?" He said he was thirsty. I thought to myself, how did you sneak up behind me like a snake? I said, "Okay, dude, get your water," and I turned on the hallway light. I said, "Atakan, please don't turn off the hallway light. The bulb in my room is faulty and gives off little light." I came up with that excuse. I couldn't exactly say, "I'm scared of you, don't turn off the light." I went back to my room, smoked, and thought until the morning prayer. I slept for an hour or two and went to work. I was working at a wedding hall. The job was easy, and the pay was decent for a student. Atakan, who had convinced me to stay and work, was just spending his time in his room. I was going to talk to him when I got home. "We are here to work and save money this summer, but you are just in your room all the time. It's a waste of time," I was going to say. That night, my boss didn't let me go because there was a Kurdish wedding, and they gave good tips. I got off work at 1 a.m. and started walking home. The wedding hall was about a half-hour walk from our place, and there were no buses at that hour. I got home and opened the door. The house was dark again. I hated it. I wanted someone to be home, the lights to be on, and to hear sounds. Call it a phobia or whatever you want, but that's just how I was. I turned on the light and went to Atakan's door. I knocked, and he opened the light first, then the door. I told him I wanted to talk and asked if we could go to his room. He said his room was messy and told me to go to the living room and he would join me. I sat down in the living room. He came over and I said, "Look, man, this path you're on isn't right. I stayed here based on your advice to earn a few bucks, but you're not working. You're just wasting your time in your room." He said, "You're right, brother. I'm having some problems lately." I said, "What problems?" We're friends, tell me. He said his family situation was bad, and his father told him he was a grown man and should be working and studying. I said, look, after hearing that from your dad, how can you still just sit in your room and waste time? He said, okay, brother, I'll go look for a job tomorrow. My plan was to go into his room when he went to look for a job and see what he was up to. I was curious if the dream I had was a coincidence and what those sounds were. Anyway, I had to work that day, so we left together in the morning, parted ways, and I went to the wedding hall, and he went to look for a job. I did some cleaning at work and then got permission from my boss to leave for a few hours. I rushed home. I was going to find out what he was doing in that room because he never came out. I got home and opened the door. I went inside. There was no sound. Aha, I thought. Atakan isn't home yet. My heart was pounding. I opened his door. The bed was made and the room was clean. At first, I didn't notice anything interesting. Then, I saw a chain sticking out from under his bed. It was a necklace. I pulled it out, opened the round pendant, and there was a picture of Atakan inside, but his eyes were cut out and replaced with 2 blue beads. What the hell, I said. Why would a person carry a picture of themselves in a necklace, and why would they cut out the eyes and put in blue beads? My dream immediately came to mind. I made a connection between them, for no reason. Atakan from my dream, and the Atakan in the necklace, with his eyes cut out and replaced with blue beads, because in my dream, only his eyes were visible, and he was looking at me with hatred, with those bright blue eyes. As I put the necklace back under the bed, I noticed dozens of candles. I was now certain that this man was up to something. I immediately left the house and started thinking about where I would sleep that night. With these thoughts, I went back to work. Evening came again, and I was going home again. I arrived home, and Atakan was there. This time the light in his room was on. I went to my room without bothering him. This time, Atakan knocked on my door. I opened it, and without even saying hello, he asked me, "Why did you go into my room?" The way he looked at me, I was literally frozen for 10 seconds. I said, "I didn't, man. I was at work all day." He said, "Don't lie." They told me. He asked why I went into his room, and if we hadn't agreed to respect each other's privacy. I said, "Who told you? What are you talking about? I didn't go in." He said, "Look, I know you went into my room, but if you do it again, you'll regret it." I said, "What are you going to do?" He smiled, and the hatred was gone, replaced by a sneer. He just said he wanted me to leave him alone. I asked him if he had found a job, just to change the subject. He didn't answer and went back to his room. I sat on my bed again, feeling a mix of shame and fear. Who had told him I went into his room? And why did he react so strongly? I lay in bed and fell asleep with these thoughts. I woke up thirsty again. The jug was full this time. My sleep was broken, and living with someone like him meant I couldn't fall back asleep once I woke up. I turned on the light. I didn't have a laptop then. Atakan had a bad one in his room, but I had a desktop in the living room. However, I didn't want to go to the living room in the middle of the night with him in the house. I lit a cigarette. While I was smoking with the light on, the door knocked. I opened it, and no one was there. I called out, "Atakan?" No response. I was sure the door had knocked. I had a cigarette, so I was fully awake. I called out Atakan more loudly, but still no response. I closed the door, not wanting to go out into the hallway. I lit another cigarette. This time a sound came, like an old woman's voice. "Open the door," she said. "What the hell is this?" I said, and opened the door. No one was there. I took my cell phone and called Atakan. He was 10 meters away in his room, but I was too scared to go there, so I called. He answered, but there was no sound. Hello? I said. No sound. Speak up, man. No sound. I shouted, that's enough. And he hung up. He said, don't ever come into my room again. And hung up. I sat up all night, planning to beat him up in the morning. In the morning, I went straight to his door and knocked. He didn't open it at first. Then I tried to open it, but it was locked. 10 seconds later, he opened the door. I said, what do you want from me? What are you doing to me? I was crying. He said, brother, what's wrong? Are you losing your mind? What have I done to you? I told him I had called him last night and he had said something. He said, I was sleeping, brother. You must have had a nightmare. I'll take you to a psychologist. I showed him my phone. There was a call record, and it showed we had talked for 10 seconds. I looked into his eyes, and the surprised, helpful expression on his face disappeared. Then he started laughing. I shouted, what are you doing, man? Who are you? Why are you doing this? He just laughed without saying anything. My alarm went off, and I woke up drenched in sweat. I drank the whole jug of water. My psyche was getting worse. I was living a mix of dreams and reality. That day, I decided to talk to Atakan and ask him everything. I had so many questions running through my head. Who had told him I went into his room? What were the beads in the picture? What were the candles for? Why didn't he ever leave his room? I worked all day with these thoughts. I stole a large bottle of Reiki from the wedding hall and brought it home that night. I knocked on his door. He opened it. I asked him to come to the living room. He asked why. I said I just wanted to talk. We used to drink every night. Look, I brought Reiki, we can drink, I said. He said he didn't feel like it, but he could sit for a while. I went to the living room and got 2 tea glasses from the kitchen. He came, and I said, I'm sorry for going into your room. It was a mistake, but I was worried about you. He said, don't worry about me. Worry about yourself. I said, look, I'm trying to help you. You've been my closest friend for almost a year. Who told you I went into your room? He looked into my eyes and smiled slightly. You're curious about the necklace and the candles, right? I just stared at him like an idiot. Okay, I'll tell you, he said. Come on. We went to his room. He took out the necklace, opened the pendant, and there was a picture of Atakan with his eyes intact. No beads. I stared at the necklace. He asked, how did you see this picture? I said, man, that's not the same necklace. Your eyes were cut out, and there were beads in their place. He said, no, it's the same necklace. The only thing that's different is how they look at you. Who are they? I asked. What are you talking about? He said, they, the others. The nightmares you're having are related to them. I said, look, I may be a jobless guy who drinks, but please don't scare me with this stuff. He said, I'm not scaring you. I'm helping you. There are some who don't like you. I'll tell you their names, and you can join us. I said, who are you people? Why would I join you? He gave me 5 3-letter names. Who are these? What kind of names are these? I said. They are my friends, he replied. He said to think of the candles as a telephone, that people have communicated with them for a long time using these candles. I just listened. I was about to recite a prayer from the Quran, but he said, don't, before I even started. What are you talking about? I said. Don't do that thing you were going to do, he said. I wasn't thinking anymore, just listening to Atakan. If you want, I can show you, he said. Show me, I said. His voice was so convincing that in that state of mind, I didn't realize what we were doing was so bad. He took out 28 candles and started to light them. As the candles burned, shadows seemed to move in the room. He arranged the candles into a shape. He took out his necklace and placed it in the center of the shape. "Can you turn off the light?" he asked. I did. "Sit next to me," he said. "Don't make a sound. Don't say anything in your mind. Just sit." He started saying some things, and as he did, the candles seemed to dim, then burn more fiercely. I didn't realize he was performing a ritual, but looking back calmly, it's very obvious. He said, "Where is name?" Then he paused for 5 seconds and angrily shouted, "Call him." He seemed to be talking to someone. I just sat there watching him. He was doing this with his eyes closed. Then he suddenly turned his head and looked into my eyes. "No," he said. As he said no, a smoke came from the candles. It looked like the room was on fire. Atakan shouted, "Go away," and then told me to turn on the light. I did. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Didn't I tell you to be quiet?" I said, "You looked at me and said no. I thought you were talking to me." He said, "I wasn't talking to you. The next time, listen to what I tell you." I said, "What happened? I'm sorry if I did something wrong." He said, "You did. I was hiding you with that necklace. They know about you now." I said, "Man, I'm finding it hard to understand you right now. What you and I are doing are not normal things. All I want is to get rid of these nightmares and go back to being normal. If I bother you, we can part ways. You stay here, and I'll go." He said, "They are powerful. You wanted this." I said, "What did I want? You forced me to be a witness to this." He said, "No, I asked you every time. You chose to be a part of this by saying yes." I said, "I'm calling my family. You're not normal." I called home, and they were in the village making grape molasses. I said I was coming back. They asked why, and I told them my boss and I didn't get along. I went to work and quit, and without going back home, I took a bus to my hometown. I went to my grandparents' house. We sat and talked, and I mentioned the nightmares. They said to take me to the village Hodja. Maybe he could write something for me. I said, "Okay." That night, we slept upstairs in my grandparents' 2-story house. I'm not used to sleeping anywhere but my own bed, so I don't fall asleep easily. I lay on the floor mattress. My parents were in one room, and I was in another. I fell asleep, and then I woke up with a weight on me. The sky was red again, but I was in my university room. I looked out the window, and it was as if it was the first time. I turned around and saw Atakan again, his face hidden, just his bright blue eyes looking at me, and his feet were reversed. I immediately woke up, covered in sweat. I was thirsty again, and I turned on the light. The door knocked. I said, "Come in." My father came in and asked, "What happened?" "You screamed." I said, "Dad, I had the same nightmare I told you about." He said, "Okay, son, go back to sleep," and left. I fell asleep without dreaming and woke up in the morning. At breakfast, I asked my dad, "What are we going to do?" He said, "What about?" I said, "The nightmares. I had another one last night." He said, "What are you talking about?" I didn't wake up at all. Night. He said, "What are you talking about?" I didn't wake up at all. Night. He said, "What are you talking about?" I didn't wake up at all. Night. He said, "What are you talking about?" I didn't wake up at all. Night. He said, "What are you